Hello, I'm Anthony. A lot of the content I make on this channel is tutorial videos on specific instruments, typically classic synths, because that's really where my heart lies. But this video takes a slightly different approach. I'm actually going to talk about my system as a whole. I'm going to talk about what software packages, what plugin packages I own, and give a brief overview of how important each of those packages is to my overall workflow. This in turn is in preparation for a series of top 5 videos that I plan to make on a whole range of subjects, everything from compressors to classic synths of the 70s, guitar multi-effects units, groove agent expansions, all sorts of different subjects where I'm going to basically say this is the best in class, this is the stuff that if you're really struggling to know where to focus your attention, go for this first. I'm also going to talk about the cost of this stuff because I know it's not cheap and I appreciate that we can't all afford everything that we want. So that's going to play a very important part in today's conversation as well. Hope you enjoy this one today. If you'd like to help me out with the cost of my plugins, check out the Patreon and channel member links below. It's an awesome way to do it. That's how I make these videos, how I make a living. Okay, so here's the format today is going to take. It's likely to be quite a long video today because I want to give you at least an introduction to each of these bundles so that you've got some sort of context. I don't just want to rattle off a generic list that's no value to anyone. Over in the owned software tab, you can see a list of all the primary vendors I have plugins for. The second tab I've broken down into individual manufacturers' costs. So across the bottom, for example, you can see that over the past 7 years, I've got 7 years worth of data here. I've spent £1,800 on Steinberg products, and you can see all of the various costs across. I've ordered these plugin manufacturers from left to right by order of importance to me. If I had to start throwing stuff away, if I had to start throwing passengers out of the dinghy, I would start at the right-hand side and work back to the stuff that I simply can't be without. Speaking of which, we start with Steinberg. Obviously, I work in Cubase. Cubase 13 Pro is therefore the most important piece of software that I own as far as music writing is concerned. And specifically Pro, I use features in Pro, particularly the control room, Vari Audio, Audio Warp, to a lesser extent the Project Logical Editor. I could probably do without that one, but those first three are absolutely essential. The only other version of Cubase that contains Vari Audio and Audio Warp is Cubase Artist. It doesn't contain control room though. If it was just that alone, that would warrant the cost of Pro for me because I use the control room in my setup. But there are also a host of additional features, nice to haves, that Pro includes that none of the other versions do. In addition to Cubase itself though, we have Absolute. So this is the bundle of software that contains primarily, or most importantly, Groove Agent and Halion, two absolutely essential features of my system, and I couldn't possibly do without either of them. Groove Agent is my rhythm engine of choice, and really the only rhythm engine of choice. If I'm making rhythm, I'm almost certainly using Groove Agent. I do use Native Instruments Contact for a lot of my world instrument sounds, and we'll have a look at that a little bit later. And I'm not going to spend an enormous amount of time looking at each plugin. You can go and check them out, and I've done full tutorial series on lots of this stuff. Groove Agent in particular actually is a fairly hideous interface wrapped around a very powerful engine, so it does take a lot of getting used to, and it's no surprise that it's the most popular of all of the video series that I've done because it's the most difficult to learn, but it is worth the investment if you can get to grips with it. It's a very, very powerful rhythm engine. It's a similar story with Halion, a very difficult interface, a very difficult application to learn, but if somebody has written a very long tutorial series describing exactly how to use it, massively powerful. And it's no exaggeration to say that with Groove Agent plus Halion 7, you would never actually need to use another synthesizer ever. You could actually write all of your music in pretty much any genre with just those two tools. It's not the way I choose to go, and I'm not actually, recommending that you do that, but I'm saying it is just that powerful, that fully featured. Just realized I was loading up sounds kind of absent-mindedly in the background there. So this is Hypnotic Dance. Which is your kind of synth-oriented dance module, very good at generating arpeggios and sequences. But if we switch to a different macro, so each one of these, they're called macros, but really they're skins on top of the Halion engine. Now I'm loading up a grand piano, and Halion takes on a completely different flavour. And at this point, it's a piano. And I think the Absolute package is the best way to go about acquiring the Steinberg stuff. Buying Groove Agent and Hallion independently and not getting the other stuff just doesn't make any sense to me. Absolute very often comes around on kind of 50% sales. Speaking of which, actually, the cost of these bundles is very difficult to assess because you need to be intelligent about it. Most plugin manufacturers very often have very aggressive sales at various points during the year where you can get 50% or more off the standard price. And so it's difficult for me to give you a holistic view of how much this stuff costs, except to say, let's have a look at how much it's cost me. Over the past 7 years, I've spent a total of £9,900 on software. So this is just plugin software, including Cubase itself. So that averages out to £1,400 a year. So a little over £100 a month for both my work expense and my primary hobby. This is the thing that I do for both joy and financial gain. What a lucky person I am. While we're hanging over on this spreadsheet, let's just have a quick look at the breakdowns as well, because not all plugin manufacturers are equal in the cost terms. Costs vary very wildly depending on how often you need to upgrade your stuff or how often you want to upgrade your packages. So historically, I've always kept my Arturia collections up to date. So whenever there's been a new release, then I've bought it, and all of that has accumulated together to cost me about £10 a month, £120 a year. We'll have a look at some of the other manufacturers a little bit later as we get to them each in turn. I suppose I should try to keep some sort of order to this process. Let's move on to the next plugin manufacturer. So we're just dealing with instruments at the moment. We'll have a look at effects later. They're a slightly different category. So the next most important bundle after the Steinberg stuff for me is Arturia. So this is where the classic synthesizers, primarily analog synthesizers, but they have also emulated digital equipment like the Synclavier and the emulator. But primarily it's classic analog stuff. I mean, here's an emulation of the Moog modular. And that's pretty much all I need in my life. I could sit listening to that for minutes on end and not get bored. The majority of the Arturia emulations are incredibly high quality, and I, as an aficionado, as a lover of music history, electronic music history, this is really where my heart lies. So the Arturia package would be the last to go. On top of the Steinberg Core stuff, and I stress again, you could just get by with the Steinberg Core package plus Absolute. If you were only going to buy kind of one overall bundle of stuff, I would say that. Just do that first. Then Arturia comes next because these classic synths are just so wonderful. They're so much fun to play with. If I'm writing a piece of music and I'm completely focused on just getting the job done, I don't go to the Arturia stuff first. My first port of call and my favourite VST plugin of all is the Spectrasonics bundle. So we're basically talking about Omnisphere here, but inside Omnisphere is also bundled Keyscape and Trillion. And together those three packages make one monster workstation to rule them all. So this is the primary Omnisphere synthesizer. And if I clear all the selection categories so that we get a list of all of the presets, and while I'm talking to you, I just kind of start scrolling down, you get some very small idea of the absolutely insane number of presets inside Omnisphere. It is unspeakably vast. You could spend your whole life just listening to each one of these presets. And the thing is, I'll kind of randomly stop and click on one. Toy Piano Classic Wash. Yeah. Every sound in this thing is the very highest quality. I mean, it's a toy piano. I expected that to sound kind of thin and weak, but it doesn't. It just has so much character and depth, and this is true across the board. I was randomly scrolling down when I selected that. I made a video some time ago on how to get the best out of the Chapman Stick emulation, but the sound is out of this world. That slap sound is exactly what a Chapman Stick sounds like, and you can really make this thing pop. It is fabulous fun to play with. And if you go back into single instrument mode, you actually get the Trillion skin where you get this kind of overview that's dedicated to, well, in this case, the Chapman stick. You can switch back to your Omnisphere controls, and suddenly you're back in full workstation mode where you can mix this thing with synthesizers. For instance, if I want to bring a synth in on channel 2, I can. And now I've added this square saw sound to the Chapman stick. That's my favorite Fender Rhodes emulation inside Keyscape. So everything sounds absolutely popping, and you're paying for the privilege. That one single plugin cost me £811. Now this is a top-loaded investment. Once you've bought it, you own it, and I haven't paid for any updates since I bought those products. So that was me buying Omnisphere and Keyscape together, and then I bought Trillion as a later package 3 years ago. So at the moment that works out at £10 a month, but that cost will go down over time because I don't need to spend any money on it. I get free upgrades, as far as I'm aware, for life. So only if they come out with a new product would I be tempted to invest further in Spectrasonics. So that's, yes, it's a lot of money up front, but you get an absolutely unbelievable thing. Now there's a virtual line drawn under those 3 manufacturers. I would say Steinberg, Arturia and Spectrasonics are the stuff that I wouldn't dream of living without. That is the absolute core, essential bundle as far as I'm concerned. And if I could only own products from 3 manufacturers, they would be them. Everything else is optional, but still really important to me. So we are still in the category of I would instantly repurchase this if all of my licenses failed and I needed to go out and buy it again. The next most important package down for me is IK Multimedia. Now the reason it's so high up in the list is because of the FX category. We'll get on to talk about that a little bit later, but just sticking with the instruments for the moment, this Total Studio Max, which is one of the worst plugin titles you'll ever come across, contains a really wonderful instrument called Syntronic. Quick detour before we have a look at Syntronic actually. Sample Tank represents another interesting thing to bear in mind with these plugin packages. I've spent all of this money buying all of this software. I've probably used less than 10% of it, and sometimes that makes me feel pretty guilty, particularly when we get on to have a look at Native Instruments, because that's a really expensive package and I really have only just scratched the surface of it. Sample Tank is an example of that. I've hardly used the thing at all. It takes up an enormous area on my music installation drive, but as yet I've barely touched it because I like to dive deep into a thing. I'm currently playing with the Korg M1 and I've been playing with it for about 2 weeks now, and pretty much everything else goes by the by. When I'm doing a deep dive into an instrument, I spend a lot of time really getting to understand it as well as I possibly can. That helps me in turn make the tutorial series, but I just really like fundamentally understanding a thing. That in turn means I can't do everything. So there's packages like Sample Tank that I've not even scratched the surface of. I've hardly even looked at it. It might be awesome, I just don't know. I have played a little bit with Syntronic too, so let's have a quick look at that. So this is a sample-based emulator of, once again, classic synths. I've already said that's where my heart lies, and so a lot of the stuff that I buy plays in that environment. I like to understand from a historical context what all of these instruments sounded like, and if I don't have a true emulation, the kind of stuff that Arturia do, at least I can get these sample-based emulators. The Yamaha SY99 is a good example of that. I owned an SY22 back in the day. It was actually my first serious synthesizer that I bought as a young man. I couldn't afford the 99. And this is pretty much the only emulation you're going to get of one. So if I load any of the instruments in this central browser at the moment, the SY99 filter is engaged. So all of these presets are SY99 presets. So that's samples you're hearing of an SY99, but Syntronic does it really well, and there's a very nice list of emulated equipment. Most of these have been covered by actual emulations. Here, for example, is an emulation of the VCS3. That's been emulated. There's a very good emulation by a company called Zills. Arturia have done an emulation of the Synthy, which is an evolution of this one, but some of them haven't been emulated by anything else that I own, and the SY is a good example of it. So I do quite like playing inside Syntronic. The sounds are very high quality, and you do get access to some instruments that I don't have from elsewhere. So that's a nice to have. I like owning the IK Total Studio Max package because you get Syntronic too, but I'm not going to try and pretend it's essential. IK Multimedia is high up in this list for another reason. I'll get to that later. The Native Instruments Complete bundle is expensive. Actually, the highest monthly average cost of any of the plugin vendors that I have. In a moment of weakness, I bought the full package, and then I've been updating it ever since. So there's me buying Native Instruments Complete 5 years ago, and I have bought a couple of full updates to it, which I probably shouldn't have done because I just don't use them enough, and I do feel kind of bad about it. So if you're budget limited, but you're looking to emulate the kind of environment that I have, Native Instruments has the biggest question mark on it because it's such a huge investment, and it's an ongoing one because every time they release a new version, you kind of feel compelled to keep up with it. You don't have to. So I have a lifetime license for Complete now. I don't ever need to spend any more money on it, but I keep having these moments of weakness where I do so. Well, one of the things that you get that I use the least of, and which is to my greatest shame, is machine expansions. I do own a physical machine, not the latest version, the £1,000 version that suddenly the price went through the roof, and I've deliberately not looked at the differences so that I'm not tempted to upgrade. But when you buy the physical machine, you also get the Machine 2 software. The Machine 2 doesn't come bundled with the Native Instruments Complete library. This is absolutely unbelievable. You have to buy the physical hardware to get the software. Once you've got the software, all of the machine expansions, which do come bundled with the Native Instrument package, all live inside this environment, and they're all freely accessible and far more editable than they are in their own right. So it's a really strange licensing situation where you basically have to buy the Native Instruments Complete bundle to get all of the software, except Machine 2 software, which comes with the physical device. So once you've got everything, you get these more or less complete rhythm packages. They're actually too rich to use straight out of the box because you're basically just lifting somebody else's music. Let's have a listen to this one, for instance. So they really are pretty much finished pieces of music, and you need to strip a lot of it back out to get to something that's actually usable in your own world. But it does also have an absolutely vast array of individual sounds that you can load individually as well. So Machine 2 is a huge thing in its own right, which I kind of should put to one side because it's not really a fundamental part of my work environment at the moment. The most important part of the Native Instruments package as far as Complete is concerned is Contact 7, because when you buy the bundle, you get all of the sample libraries as well, and it once again with the whole far more samples, far more sounds than you could ever possibly use. Where Contact 7 really shines is as a dedicated sample player. So at the moment I'm loading the Stradivari cello, which actually featured in a song that I released last week called Lost at Sea. The sounds are unbelievable. So Halion 7 is my sample workstation of choice if I want to load a sound in and play with it and have access to just about every feature you could conceivably imagine. That's the most powerful synthesizer engine I own. Contact 7 is my favourite sample player because the sounds are so unbelievable. It just sounds exactly, well, it is a cello, obviously you're listening to samples, but even the articulations, the intelligence of the dynamic articulations between the sounds, everything that Contact 7 does it really, really well. One of the other things that I use Contact 7 for, in fact, probably my primary use for it, is world percussion. So these 5 sample packages here that you can see all play a very large part in a lot of the music that I write. Because if I want individual samples of something like Dole, for instance, then I go here. There's nothing else that sounds that good right out of the box. The other aspect of Native Instruments Complete that I use quite a bit is Reactor 6. So this is basically my modular environment of choice. I'm in the course of quite a long running series. Every now and again, I'll dip back in and make new videos on Reactor 6 where I'm going to be plugging together all of these modules. If you really want to go full nerd, then Reactor is the place to do it, because you get to build your own synthesizers with all of these individual modules. And they have this wonderful feature called racks, where you don't have to individually wire all of your components together. You get the building blocks pre-made for you, in the same way that if you were buying, for instance, a Euro rack, you'd buy the module, put it into your Euro rack, and then you're just connecting cables up to it, and away you go. You get that concept with Reactor 6. And some of the sounds that you can get out of Reactor are absolutely otherworldly. And it's very often misbehaved as far as just making sound immediately. It doesn't particularly need a keyboard in order to do its thing. Have I justified this? Hell no. Is it awesome fun to play with? Yes. Do I love owning Complete? Yes. It's my great indulgence. So that number is not justifiable. That doesn't mean to say I don't absolutely love owning it. I really do. And that's why it's so high on the list. It would be higher if it was cheaper. But if I had to throw something away, and basically cost, is a very important feature. It's one of those where these two forces kind of collide. Native Instruments drops down the list a little bit because it's so much more expensive than all of the other packages. We're going to be here forever if I don't speed up a little bit. Let's have a more brief look at the next four. So we've got Roland and Korg next. Roland is a cloud service, so you pay. The last time I was subscribed was £190 for a year's worth of subscription to the Roland Cloud. But for every year that you're a subscriber, you get given a free number of permanent licenses. So these are the classic synthesizer licenses that I acquired during the time that I had a subscription to the Roland Cloud. I'm not currently subscribed, and that means I lose access to their larger workstation environment. It used to be called Xenology. I think it's called, is it Galaxia? I can't remember because I've not been subscribed for a couple of years now. But I do get these wonderful, wonderful, legendary synthesizer emulations. So if you're paying £190 a year for this subscription and you're getting 2 free synths at the end of it, you could kind of treat each one of these as costing £95 each. Pretty indulgent, admittedly, but this is Roland emulating their own synthesizers. They're going to do a very good job of it. Yeah, all of these legendary synths just sound absolutely beautiful. Many of them have also been emulated by Arturia, so that's potentially slightly reduced their value, but the ones that haven't been, JD800, the D50 being good examples, but there are others. It's nice to own them, what can I say? Next along we have the Korg package, and you can see some of the all-time classics here, the ARP Odyssey, M1. Well, pretty much every name in that list is epic, because Korg, Roland and Yamaha between them have basically defined what it means to be a synthesizer for the past 50 years. This is my sandpit of choice at the moment. I'm just preparing to make a tutorial series on the M1, and this is just glorious nostalgia for me, because I owned an 01 in the early 90s, which is an evolution of the M1. So all of these sounds are they're just so comfortable, so familiar to me. And all of those Korg emulations, again, very faithful to the original, absolutely perfect, basically, and pretty cheap, relatively. Once you've bought the collection, where's Korg? Here we are. Here's the Korg collection. Another one of those things that you want to look out for the sales. The sales come around periodically and you can get quite big discounts on them. So the average yearly cost for owning all of the Korg stuff, pretty low compared with the others, considering how good quality sounding those synthesizers are. The reason it's quite low down in this priority list is because there's simply other stuff that's more important. Korg is these synthesizers are essentially more good stuff on top of already good stuff, as opposed to having anything on their own which is genuinely essential. Most of the manufacturers above have at least one product that I consider to be completely essential and best in class. GeForce and Cherry Audio don't appear in the cost spreadsheet because I've been given review copies of various of their packages. On that basis, I don't think it's right for me to talk about the value of those synthesizers because I personally haven't paid for them. Right down at the bottom is poor old BFD, which got sacked. Basically, when I decided to invest all of my energy into really understanding Groove Agent and cracking that nut, BFD kind of fell by the side and I simply don't use it at the moment. So here's me buying the original bundle, but as things stand at the moment, that money is kind of in suspension. I'm not permanently sacked BFD, simply not using it at the moment. I really don't like the interface. Maybe if BFD 4 comes out, I might rethink that. Okay, onto the FX side. I knew I'd get carried away talking too long about each of these packages. I love them all so much. I just want to kind of advertise them and say, yeah, you really should buy this one. Onto the Arturia FX collection. So now we're talking about effects rather than instruments. And the Arturia bundle, as is their wand, typically emulations of classic pieces of equipment, and many of these are now my go-tos. This compressor, for instance, this is an emulation of a Neve compressor. It's probably my favorite compressor at the moment. I'm just enjoying its sound more than any of the others, and so I'm tending to go to that. If I start comparing and contrasting individual plugins in this collection, we really will be here forever. But suffice to say that this bundle, this is actually the FX Collection 2. That's the latest FX collection I bought. I think they're up to 4 at this point. Actually very highly recommended. Arturia is as high as it is in the list primarily because of its synthesizer, its contribution to synthesizer plugins, but don't underestimate how good these effects are. They really are absolutely top quality. And finally, we get to the reason why IK Multimedia is number 4 in this list, because Amplitube is quite simply the best guitar multi-effects plugin there is. I do own Bias FX, which is actually very, very good, but Amplitube is the best. It has a very large list of licensed kits. These classic Fender amps are absolutely wonderful. An equally impressive list of plugins to drop in. A really nice and intuitive interface where you can tie all of these things together, and the whole thing just hangs together in a really wonderful way. Routing is incredibly intuitive and very straightforward. Fabulous mixing features, just an absolutely awesome guitar multi-effects. So that's why IK Multimedia is as high as it is in my list. It's not just Amplitube though. T-Rax, which is the IK Multimedia insert bundle, is also wonderful. And you see a very large list. These are T-Rax, so TR5 is the T-Rax kind of moniker. And once again, these are emulations of classic pieces of kit. So this is a Neve 1073, and I find that they sound warm and musical, and a lot of the T-Rax stuff is very high in my go-to list. At a mighty number 5 on this list, and a company that's not even been mentioned yet, is iZotope. This is so boring, but it's absolutely essential. This is all of your mastering stuff. In fact, iZotope is so prevalent, you're hearing it right now. We have a look in the control room. There's a denoise module here that comes from the iZotope suite. This is hiding the ambient noise. If I shut up, there's a helicopter going past at the moment that you can't hear. It's just disappeared now, but it was there. It was just kind of flying past. So all of the ambient noise is taken away by RX denoise. It does so much more than that. Every piece of music that I release has a mastering product called Ozone on the mastering bus, which basically masters the thing up to -14 LUFS, which is a global standard. It's all very dull and very uninteresting and absolutely 100% essential. Pretty much Ozone on its own gets iZotope up to number 5 on the list, and then RX is wonderful as well. So that was a one-time purchase, and I haven't actually bought any other iZotope products since I bought the mastering suite. So that's becoming increasingly good value over time. FabFilter hasn't been mentioned yet either, and what FabFilter bring to the party is absolutely no nonsense. Get that job done. End of discussion. If you don't want any colour in your effect and you just want it to do the job, use a Pro C compressor. All of the other compressors have their own characteristics because they're emulations of real pieces of equipment. The Pro C compressor just compresses. So if you want to do like vocal ducking, for instance, I would always use the Pro C for any sidechain ducking because it's just completely clinical. And that's the case with all of the products. Pro Q is a marvelous surgical EQ. that you can just do really targeted work on individual frequency bands. Beautiful interfaces. They all do exactly what they say they're going to do with absolutely no fuss. You want a gate? Bang, there's your gate. Nothing there that isn't necessary, and it all just does the job really easily. So FabFilter's yet another one of those bundles that you buy it and you're pretty much done. Where are we? There we are. So there's me buying the FabFilter bundle, and there was an update that had a couple of enhancements that I wanted to buy here, but essentially a one-time purchase and you're done. Very similar kind of thing with the Sound Toys bundle. Are they essential? No. Can you do any of these jobs elsewhere? Yes, kind of. But if I want a delay and I just want that delay to be completely cast iron and just beautiful sounding, I go to Echo Boy before any other delay. As I work through the various top 5 series, you're going to see Sound Toys products appear multiple times because they're all just very, very high quality. Pretty cheap too. That was me buying the Sound Toys 5 bundle. Haven't spent anything else on Sound Toys products since. Very, very worthwhile investment. Definitely worth that price. Waves is an odd one because everybody feels like you have to have a Waves product. It feels like you're just missing out if you don't. And so many of the videos that you watch, particularly from professional producers or mixers, they're going to be using the Waves package. They are surely the world's most popular plugin bundle and absolutely vast. I mean, look at just how much stuff you get. So I bought the Horizon bundle. You need to be very, very careful with your Waves sales because the price variance is ridiculous. So keep your eye on the bundle prices and try to guess how many of these like overwhelming list of things you actually need. The most expensive bundle, the Mercury bundle, contains products that I'm just not interested in. And the cheapest I've ever seen, it was £800 once. I saw it for £800 once. That's the cheapest I ever saw it. What did I pay for my Horizon bundle? £242. And there's nothing in the Mercury bundle that I'm remotely interested in. So that was a win for me. Finally, we have the Positive Grid package. This is the bias bundle. And here it is. It does a very similar job to Amplitube. It actually does it very well. And there are some emulations in here that Amplitube doesn't have. Others that the Bias FX version is better than Amplitube. I'm happy I own it, and it was pretty cheap. So it was a one-time cost, £250 for a really pretty impressive music bundle. So please don't ask me to uninstall any of these packages. I love them all. Well, everything up to and including Positive Grid. Poor old BFD at the end. If you're facing this daunting mountain to climb from a starting point, yes, it's going to take some doing. It's going to take quite a bit of pain. I mean, that's a lot of money I've spent in 7 years. But on a year-by-year basis, that cost is coming down consistently because many of these packages I've bought and I don't really see very much need in constantly updating. Hope this overview has been useful to you. Please hit like if it was. And I'll see you for the forthcoming series of top 5 videos where we break into this in a little bit more detail and talk about my favourite software. Thanks very much. See you later.